we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're very excited to talk to you all about our new report, which just released moments ago, the Maryland's Climate Pathway Report. We're going to have just brief remarks from Maryland Department of Environment Secretary McElwain, and then the Center for Global Sustainability at the University of Maryland's Director, Nathan Holtman. And then we're going to hear from the lead author, Kathleen Kennedy, on the report. And then we'll open it up for questions. Some of you already submitted those, so we'll take a look at those, but also please go ahead and submit your questions in the chat function. And we will address those. We have a number of experts here, as you can see, that will help also address any technical questions. And of course, if there's anything beyond that we want to take offline, we're happy to follow up and do so. And so I'll pass it over to the Secretary.
Thank you, Shannon. Good morning. I want to start by bringing greetings from Governor Wes Moore on this really important day when we're taking another step forward in achieving the bold goal of making Maryland a leader in combating climate change. And I also want to thank the University of Maryland President, Dr. Darrell Pines, Nate Holtman, and really his entire team at the Center of Global Sustainability, and everyone really who's worked to get the hard data that we need to make the decisions that impact the long-term health of Marylanders. When it comes to climate change, we have an urgent need to take action in order to create a brighter future for our children and grandchildren. And we're already doing so much, but it's time that we do even more. So this report, it lays a foundation for a just and equitable climate response that will help build greener, healthier communities across the state. And we now have the most advanced analysis from Maryland's best scientists to give us the full suite of options and opportunities to realize Maryland's nation-leading climate goals. And this, again, it's just the beginning, because starting today, the release of this report, it marks the beginning of a public comment period where we're going to be seeking feedback from all Marylanders and stakeholders. We want to know what you think about how to turn the analysis that you'll see here in the report into an action plan. Over the summer and fall, we will take all the feedback and data that we receive and develop a final report in December. And that report will include specific next steps that Maryland need to take in order to address climate change. So our goal is clear: make Maryland a zero emission state. And that means we need to look at an all society and all government approach. And we're going to get there with partnerships. And we need to enlist all Marylanders in this effort. So together we can and we will do bold things. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Dr. Holtman for more details about the report.
Thank you, Secretary McElwain. It has been a great privilege to be able to work on this report in partnership with the state of Maryland, with your office at MDE. And I know you've also helped us be in touch with numerous other agencies in the state, as well as with the governor's office. And our job here was to help understand what those pathways might look like for us to achieve our goals here in Maryland, namely a 60% reduction by 2031 and a net zero economy by 2045. Those are the most ambitious goals. They're the most aggressive goals in the country. And I'm proud that we are going to do this together working with the state, working across the entire state's economy with all stakeholders. And our job was to understand how that might be possible. We at the Center for Global Sustainability did work with the state over many months in the first half of this year to better understand those possible actions that might be taken by the state, that are already being taken by the state, and how those can be implemented fully. We also tried to understand and put in the report how partnerships working with the federal government, with the new resources available through the federal government, and also partnering across the entire state of Maryland and all levels of governance can help us together achieve those goals. For more details, I will hand over to our report's lead author. There was a large author team, and I encourage you all, as you download the report, to take a look at that team. Grateful to those authors, as well as partners they're on this call, also partners at the University of Maryland Department of Geography, as well as Towson University. So with that, I would like to hand over to Professor Kathleen Kennedy for your comments on the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Nate. I'm going to just walk you briefly through some of the highlights of the report. Could you enable screen sharing, please? I've got some slides. So as you've already heard, Maryland is a climate leader. And with the Climate Solutions Now Act, the state set a target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 60% relative to 2006 levels by 2031. And it also set a target to reach net zero by 2045. So in the context of these goals, this report presents two core scenarios. The first, which you see on the left of this figure, is the current policies scenario. And this is all on the books policies in Maryland, as well as key federal policies, such as the Inflation Reduction Act. And we model the impact of these policies through 2050. And we find that this current policies, with full implementation of those policies, can achieve 51% reductions by 2031. Our second scenario is Maryland's climate pathway. And in this scenario, we layer on additional policies on top of all of those current policies, which are also still included, to reach the state's 60% reduction goal in 2031 and reach net zero in 2045. And I'll just note here that the negative emissions that you see coming in Maryland's climate pathway are to meet the net zero goal. The 60% reduction goal is a gross emissions goal, so negative emissions are not part of the pathway to that. And now here, I'm going to dig in a little bit more to how we actually get there. So in this figure, you'll see on the far left, the 2006 baseline in million metric tons of CO2 equivalents. And from that baseline, the state needs to reduce 73.3 megatons of emissions by 2031. The next column you'll see is historical reductions in green. And as of the 2020 inventory, Maryland has already achieved 36.7 megatons of reductions, putting the state about halfway to its goal. Next, you'll see all of the different sectors laid out with emissions reductions, with a light shading representing current policies and the darker shading representing Maryland's climate pathway. And our analysis shows that full implementation of current policies can achieve another 26 megatons of reduction. So there's a 10.6 megaton gap left that must be filled by additional policies. And that's what you'll see in the Maryland's climate pathway. And while you'll note here that electricity and transportation sectors are the largest contributors in terms of megatons, every single sector is part of the pathway and does contribute to these emissions reductions. So we can also look at these sectors in terms of their individual percent reductions. And so you can see, again, electricity is the largest percent reduction as well as the largest megaton reduction. Transportation has a somewhat smaller percent change, but again, you saw on the previous slide, is large in terms of megatons. So it's key to remember here that even small reductions or small sectors are very important to this pathway. And all sectors are included and all sectors are needed to really reach these state targets. And you can see that here in this figure, where we lay out certain key mitigation strategies that can help the state achieve its goal. And we note the specific sectoral actions that can support those strategies. So for instance, on the left, you'll see that rapid and equitable electrification is a key pillar of this pathway. And that involves action not just from the electricity sector, but also from the transportation sector and building sector. Other key pillars involve enhancing efficiency with a focus on improving livelihoods in low-income communities, prioritizing sustainable community design, exploring alternative fuels and energy sources, phasing out non-CO2 gases, including methane and HFCs, and last but not least, fully implementing federal policies and making sure that federal incentives from policies such as the Inflation Reduction Act are fully utilized. And taken together, all of these actions can help Maryland reach its state goal while also delivering benefits to the state in terms of public health, job creation, and other economic benefits. And with that, I'll turn it back to Shannon.
Thank you, Kathleen. So we'll open up to questions. We have a couple already. So first question we have is, so this, and I can invite the panelists to go on video if you'd like. First question is, so the model seems pretty robust and technical, but how can we actually account for this in Maryland's reality, and what does this mean for the daily Marylander?
So I think this was part of our process that we worked very closely with state agencies to ensure that our model was not just a technical exercise. We're really taking into account the state context and what's really happening on the ground and making sure that all of our data was relevant to Marylanders. And we also make sure to analyze benefits where we see that the average Marylander can see, really good things come out of this pathway for them. They can see new jobs and growth in personal income and these kind of benefits. Shannon, you're on mute.
Yeah, I just realized that. Does anyone else, maybe Chris from Maryland, do you want to weigh in on that as well?
Yeah, I'd love to. Sure thing. Chris Hoagland, I'm the director of the Air and Radiation Administration at the Department of the Environment. And as Kathleen said, what this would mean for Marylanders, so first of all, this is a step in the process. And as the secretary said, in December, we're going to roll out the plan. And in the meantime, we want everybody's input on the specific steps the state should take. And so what that will mean, what this transition to a clean economy will mean for Marylanders is that the state and the federal government will be helping ensure that everyone can take advantage of the benefits from things like saving money by driving an electric car, and enjoy the economic benefits from investments in communities, investments in clean energy, investments in clean transportation, investments in clean air. So there are huge economic benefits and health benefits that will be enjoyed by all Marylanders, in addition to us addressing the global climate challenge and avoiding the worst impacts of climate change in the future.
Great. So we have another question on some of these key elements in the pathway that was presented today. So some of the key policies or policy levers that are a potential for allowing Maryland to reach their climate goals is VMT reductions. Can you speak a little bit more about how we accounted for VMT in the analysis?
Alicia or Steve, could you chime in here?
Sure. So for VMT, GCAM, we have native output from GCAM that our modeling tool that tracks the energy flows and equipment stocks for the transportation sector. And then we cross-check that with some data we got from MDOT. And we also have been doing our own research on various subnational actions that are happening in terms of projections and what an ambitious goal might be for future VMT reductions. So combining all of that together, that's how we got our VMT numbers. And we did also look at VMT reductions per capita. That is not included in the report, but that's something that we could also calculate.
Steve, do you have anything to weigh in on that?
No, yeah, but just mentioned that part of that VMT reduction is the result of a set in our current policy scenario. The state already has policies to encourage reduce use of vehicles, and then there are some additional policies assumed in a policy scenario that are taken together to form our assumption for VMT reduction path.
And if I could jump in a little bit, just so everyone's clear, VMT stands for vehicle miles traveled. It's a semi-arcane term, just an estimate of what it sounds like, the number of miles being driven by vehicles in the state. So a really important strategy is for the state to continue to invest in and expand different transportation options for everybody, especially additional investments in public transportation, like the Red Line project that Governor Moore announced a couple of weeks ago, so that everybody has a choice for how they get to go where they need to go. And so everyone has transit opportunities that will get them where they want to go on time, and the economy and the environment can enjoy all of the benefits from that.
Great. We have some more questions coming in. Can you talk about some of the assumptions that were built into the full implementation scenarios? So what does that mean? What do these scenarios mean in reality? And how do we account for if, no one can actually predict the future. We don't have a crystal ball. Our model is robust, but how are we making these assumptions, and how can we credibly put this path forward?
So one thing you'll see in the report, we do include a sensitivity analysis where we look at what happens if these policies are not fully implemented. So full implementation is an assumption, and it will require additional effort. It's not something that is, baked in, but it's certainly possible with the policies that Maryland already has in place. And so you can see the sensitivity analysis for a sector by sector breakdown of what that could mean if policies are not fully implemented as well. Alicia or Steve, do you want to chime in with any specifics on that?
Well, just to mention, and the report does lay out what happens under current policies. So that is, and that does not meet the goals, just with current policies in place, if fully implemented. So that's one step. And then we have a suite of additional policies to meet the goal. And then, as Kathleen said, a sensitivity analysis of less than complete implementation of those additional policies, which does miss the goal. So that gives a spectrum of future pathways depending on implementation.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we're also assuming full implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act policies. So that assuming Marylanders get the full amount to subsidize different technologies, renewable technologies, and EVs, and so forth.
Okay, we have another question. I'll pass to Nate to start off. So what does, in the report, there's a lot of wording about this all of society approach and economy-wide, but there's a sector by sector breakdown. What does this all mean, and how does this all add up to the full pathway?
Sure. Great question. And one of the things that we find when we look at how to do this kind of achieve these big goals like Maryland has put forward for ourselves, is that you do need, as Secretary McElwain noted at the outset, you do need to work quickly, effectively, efficiently, and in partnership across all of our parts of our state. And that includes the diverse types of sectors and businesses that work in those sectors. It includes working with communities at the kind of more local level and making sure that we understand how to integrate the actions in a way that will be maximally helpful for all of our people. And then also working not only in the state, but also making sure that we are working in partnership with federal government, because there is a lot of potential value for us here in making those partnerships strong and utilizing that kind of federal and state partnership to help achieve our goals. So that's the kind of what all of society really means, is that we really just have to kind of work together quickly and in partnership to realize those different pieces that the report then outlines, right? So we were just talking about vehicle miles traveled and transportation strategy, right? So that's more of a narrow thing just on transportation. It has to do with electric vehicles. It has to do with charging stations. It has to do with public transit access. And those all kind of cut across different levels of our state and different types of parts of the economy. And then similarly in all the other pieces, I won't go through all of them, but like all of the other pieces that are then outlined in the report, each of them has its own kind of manifestation of how we do partnerships, how we kind of structure that. One of the things that we've done in this report and using this methodology that we present there is we can then add up how all those pieces actually then aggregate up to the state. And then we can understand how that works in the modeling and how that works kind of across the US economy, because that's also an important part of how our state will realize benefits overall. So let me stop there and see if others might want to pipe in, but that's kind of how I would look at it.
Yeah, I think I'll note that the report you all have prepared with us sort of includes, for all of those measures, specifics in the report about here are the potential specific policies, right? And so here are different options for the discrete steps the state can take to make all these things happen, to translate sort of the numbers in a model into action on the ground. And so that's what we want to learn about over the next coming months in this outreach process as we bring this report to the public and talk about how do we, between now and December, how do we build this action plan and specify the steps that the state ought to take based on the options presented in today's report.
Great, thanks. Next question, how does this pathway account for impacts on a daily Marylander and their well-being? We'll start with Kathleen.
Sure. So this is a great question. We note throughout the report in considerations for policy implementation sections where there are many, many opportunities where these actions can provide benefits to low-income communities and help, bring benefits to the state. So those are listed throughout the report. We also do a complete analysis of not just GHG emissions, but also co-pollutants that can have impacts on public health. And so we use a secondary model called COBRA from the EPA. And this tells us that setting these policies can provide significant health benefits to the Maryland communities and can help provide some reductions in key symptoms, as well as reductions in mortality. And finally, we do an analysis of economic impacts in partnership with the Regional Economic Studies Institute at Towson. And they use another secondary model, which says that this pathway can provide significant new jobs, I believe over 16,000 cumulatively through 2031, as well as significant benefits for personal income and GDP growth. So would anyone else like to chime in on that as well?
We appreciate the detailed analysis in the report and do refer everyone to those sections where it shows just how beneficial this transition will be in so many different ways. Economically, in terms of people's health, you can see behind Nate a reminder of an unfortunate reminder we've received in the last couple of days about the importance of air quality to public health, as Maryland has endured several additional days of poor air quality from climate change driven wildfires in Canada. So there's so many different benefits to consider, and the report is very comprehensive with analyses of just how large those will be and varied those will be and how much different communities will benefit from a transition like that envisioned in this report.
Great. And can you talk a little bit more, maybe Nate, I'll pass to you on how this transition, such a rapid transition, could potentially impact the most vulnerable that are already experiencing the worst impacts of climate change, and this transition can sometimes burden vulnerable communities.
Yeah, so that's an important point, and one that I think illustrates the value of our doing this type of conversation, of illustrating kind of what the pathway might look like, inviting comment, getting feedback, making adjustments as we need to. That's part of, I think, how we make sure that we're paying the right attention to the right people and places in our state. Another dimension of that is also to note that there is already a lot of work being done to look at guarding against those potential negative near-term impacts, and that means, again, there is a lot of partnership to be had with the federal government, ensuring President Biden, for example, has initiated a Justice 40 initiative, which says that 40% of investments have to go to historically underserved communities, and that's kind of a area that I believe the state, actually you should speak to it, but is already kind of working on with the administration. And also, here in our state, we've been very focused on that. And I know our state leadership has been very focused on ensuring that. So I'll let them talk more about what they're doing, just in terms of how we think about it in the analysis. That is kind of part of how we did the analyses that Kathleen and Chris also raised, which is that we do look at also the positive benefits of the rapid expansion of these services, of the improved air quality, of the investments and the jobs that are actually going to be catalyzed by this transformation. And so that part is also part of the story, and that's something that we also want to be maximizing on the benefit side, just as we're trying to guard on the kind of impact side.
Yep, that's right, Nate. And between the federal government, all the ways that the federal money is prioritized through the Justice 40 initiative into investments in overburdened and underserved communities, the Climate Solutions Now Act also set out processes for the state to do the same, right? To prioritize the investments in communities that have not been invested in, and in communities that are disproportionately impacted by climate change and air pollution. And so that is an extraordinarily important part of the strategy to make this, as the Secretary said, a just and equitable transition to a clean economy.
Yes, this was a key feature of the analysis, that we are trying to produce a dynamic pathway that ensures no Marylander is left behind, and that everyone can benefit from this transition.
Thank you all. Okay, so we have time for one more question. I apologize. There's still some questions left that are a little more technical. And so we will follow up on these and make sure that you get to talk to the report authors and experts as needed to help answer your questions. But just last question, I'm going to pass to the Secretary. What are the next steps, and what does this all mean for Maryland?
Thank you. So as I said earlier in my beginning talking points, this is just the beginning. And so what we're going to do now is open up this public process. And again, we want to hear from everyone. We want to hear from stakeholders and Marylanders, and this listening session is an opportunity for us to hear even more of what you're thinking, and what do you think it's going to take for us to put these options into action. And I keep repeating it, but I must say, this is not the final report. This is just a list of options that we all need to think about. And I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. We'll be in touch.